Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and gamers of the jury. May it please the court. Alex here, a lawyer who loves games. And on the docket today, we have a preliminary hearing where I'll offer my initial impressions on the case of Paper Mario, the Thousand-Year Door for Nintendo Switch. It's a remake of the quirky 2004 GameCube RPG of the same name, which just so happens to be one of my favorite games of all time. I grew up on the GameCube, and Thousand Year Door was one of my very first console RPGs. Its zany world completely blew my mind as a kid, and I beat it more times than I'd care to admit. This impressions video does admittedly go on a bit longer than I intend, but the remake is truly special to me. It's a chance to revisit an old favorite I haven't played in decades, see how it holds up, and explore what's new, so I'm really excited to talk about this game, and get ready for a very full preliminary hearing. I've got a lot to say. So far, I've played through the prologue and first chapter, which took me around 5 hours. From what I can tell, the remake is close to one-to-one with the original. It's comparable to the Demon's Souls remake on PS5, where it completely modernizes the presentation, adds a few quality of life improvements and minute changes, and otherwise leaves the original game pretty much entirely intact. So don't go in expecting a complete reimagining like, say, the Resident Evil remakes. You're getting more or less the same core game as the 2004 original. So my big questions going in were, first, 20 years later, is the original game as good as I remember? And second, did Intelligent Systems, both the original developer and the developer of this remake, do enough to justify a full $60 price tag? So, without further ado, let's dive into this case. Long story short, I loved what I played of this remake. As an adult, 20 years after the original release, replaying the Thousand Year Door took me right back to my childhood. The game starts in the rough and tumble town of Rogueport, the central hub of the game, and while the initial plot hook is to find Princess Peach, the focus quickly shifts to the legendary Thousand Year Door hidden in the ruins beneath the city. Mario's quest is to collect the 7 crystal stars, and each star gets its own hyper-episodic chapter with all sorts of clever themes. So far, I've managed to complete the prologue in Rogueport and the first chapter, which tasks you with slaying a dragon terrorizing Petalburg, an idyllic Koopa village. From the very start, the writing is just absolutely hilarious. Pretty much everything in the game is some sort of joke or pun, and I found myself chuckling at the whip-smart dialogue almost constantly. Even as an adult, no small feat for a 20-year-old kid's game. And there are so many great characters, but Mario's first partner, a snarky Goomba named Goombella, is especially funny. And her omnipresent tattle ability means that you'll be hearing a lot of her caustic insights throughout the game as you scan enemies, NPCs, environments, really pretty much everything for useful information. Although the game's dialogue and Rogueport's denizens are very funny, the overarching tone of the story is actually surprisingly dark, with some moments that will genuinely surprise you. There's a noose front and center in the second screen of the game, which is just crazy for a Mario game. That's not to say this game is too grimdark, but it's a lot more edgy than Mario typically is. But I will say, the overall vibe perfectly encapsulates Nintendo's experimental GameCube era. All of this is held together by wonderful papercraft levels that are just full of character. You acquire multiple exploration abilities through both Mario and his partners that practically beg you to backtrack as you go, which sort of gives the game's level design and exploration Metroidvania quality. Of course, this is an RPG, so combat is a big part of the game too. Thousand Year Door's turn-based system revels in its simplicity. Even late in the game, stats are refreshingly small numbers that you can easily work with, so you'll know exactly how much damage you'll do and take from any given attack. Expect single-digit damage numbers for most of the game, assuming the remake continues sticking close to the original. Timing is as critical to combat as strategy, with context-sensitive action commands that give you extra attacks, damage, and even defense if you guard well. The combat is made even more engaging by its ambitious presentation as a stage play, with meta mechanics like props that can fall and damage you, and an audience that will either power you up or heckle you with damaging tosses of trash, depending on what kind of show you're putting on. So this all adds up into a simple but extremely engaging intuitive system that I thoroughly enjoy so far, just like I did as a kid. And I will say I haven't seen that much of a challenge yet, but it's early game, and I remember it being quite hard as a kid, so I think it'll wrap up. There's also a decent amount of character choices through the badge system, which grants Mario all sorts of buffs and special attacks that actually allow players to create surprisingly specific builds. I haven't fought too many bosses yet, but each one so far at least has been a great time. Hooktail, the dragon and first major boss that guards the Crystal Star, is exceptional and subverts expectations in some truly clever ways that I'm not going to spoil in an impressions video. Suffice to say, I had an absolute blast revisiting this classic. The base game, without a doubt, holds up 20 years later. So, the underlying original game is as good as I remember, at least so far. What about what's new? Well, I can confidently say from the first few hours alone that this remake feels almost completely modernized. It applies a beautiful new coat of paint and some nice quality of life features to make this legacy title worth its price and easily one of Nintendo's best remaster or remake efforts. I think what I've shown so far mostly speaks for itself. The game looks stunning. It might as well be a totally new game for how great everything looks, much like the excellent Demon's Souls remake, like I said before. The wonderful papercraft worlds of the original look amazing on the Switch, with assets from textures to objects, even the sprites that look so good that I can only assume the entire game was remade from the ground up. New lighting and reflection effects really give the visuals a modern oomph. I was especially impressed by the reflections in the Thousand-Year Door room that make things feel even more grand in scale. One other highlight was the approach up to Hooktail's lair, which felt far more cinematic and ambitious than before thanks to the new tech. There's all sorts of little things that I believe are completely new. For example, you can smash pieces of garbage in Rogueport with your hammer now, or smush cockroaches for coins, or harass an obsessive toad with a creepy amount of Princess Peach merch. You can even see little portraits of Koops and his dad together, or the mayor of Petalburg in his youth with presumably his wife, all of which I believe are completely new details and little bits of interactivity that make an excellent game even better. Character sprites also look much improved with updates that go far beyond simple resolution bumps. I caught what I believe to be quite a few completely new animations from all sorts of characters, even like relatively unimportant ones like Dupree, the womanizing weirdo who dresses like Elvis. General animations also feel much smoother and more complex. Plus, Mario can swing his hammer in all directions now, which is a big shift from the more restrictive movement of the original. There's totally new music here too, but that's actually one of the few aspects of the remake that I don't totally love. It sounds just a bit overdone to me, with orchestral music that feels a little bit too grand and lacks the simple but hard to put your finger on weirdness of the original. But that said, it's still fun to hear new takes on the classic tunes. There's practically a whole game's worth of music that I haven't encountered yet, so I'll stick with the new music. Critically, there's a badge that lets you keep the old music at absolutely no cost. So if you like the original soundtrack better, that's totally an option. There are also a fair amount of quality of life improvements. Nothing huge, but I appreciate all of them. The inventory now has space for 15 items compared to 10, easing the annoying inventory management of the original. The maps give you collectible percentages, which is a massive boon to all the completionists like me. A partner wheel lets you switch buddies on the fly without wading through menus. Goombella hints can give confused players a tip on where to go next, while prophecies, which give other tips, are stored on the pause menu instead of before you had to just memorize them when you first got them. You can also now re-examine tattled enemies for free without burning a turn to tattle again. That's a big one. And there's a cute new Battle Master NPC that can help players master attack and defense timing. I'm sure there's more quality of life improvements I'll find as I go, but I think that's everything I've seen so far. I do think this game looks about as good as a Switch game can look, but there's certainly some compromises. I blame these on the aged hardware, not intelligent systems, but I still think these flaws are important to discuss. First off, there's some jaggleys throughout the game that some better anti-aliasing on a stronger system would no doubt take care of. And on the much more controversial side of things, this game is 30 FPS, which some would argue is a massive downgrade from the 60 FPS of the original. I personally don't think it's that huge of a deal for Thousand Year Door. This is a mostly slow-paced game in terms of its action, and the action commands themselves all have pretty generous timing that can be practiced with the help of the Battle Master, or the time it can be expanded with badges if the player needs help. I, of course, would prefer 60 FPS, all things considered, but I think it's a compromise that the devs made to allow for all the amazing visual upgrades, and I think that's an acceptable compromise in this specific game. I still think the game looks very good even at 30 FPS, but hopefully these minor annoyances will be fixed by next year's Super Switch. From the portion I've played so far, I can confidently say that Thousand Year Door is just as amazing as I remember. This is an extremely unique and wonderful game with a beautiful new coat of paint that completely updates its visuals for modern audiences. I loved what I played, and I can't wait to see how the rest of the game looks. I'll certainly continue with this one, so please like and subscribe for more gaming commentary, and let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. I'll try to finish the game soon so I can drop my full verdict. And with that, ladies, gentlemen, and gamers of the jury, the court is adjourned. Until next time.